Afternoon. Moving on with our program, I would like to welcome Mr. Robert Friedman. He is the Chief Business Development Officer of Full Stack Modular. Today, Mr. Friedman will be speaking on offsite construction that delivers Caribbean hotels and apartment buildings installed in days. Mr. Friedman has over 25 years of experience in real estate, development, finance, and management. He's the head of business development at Full Stack Modular, the leading innovator in the design, manufacture, and construction of mid and high-rise modular buildings. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Robert Friedman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really want to thank, before I begin this talk, the organizers of this event, Dr. Thomas and Raphael and the entire team and everyone involved. It's been real eye-opening and I think groundbreaking. And I know that considering this is the first of this time, first event of this type here, I know that the second annual and the third annual can only get bigger and better, and there's a lot of good things in store. The talk that I want to give is entitled Offsite Construction for the Caribbean, and for the purposes of this talk, we're focusing on the main types that I think benefit from modular or offsite construction, and that's apartments and hospitality. The reason for that is, as you'll see, with offsite construction, when you're building modularly, one of the key benefits is that if you're building repeatable units, then you can build much more efficiently. So for example, in today's office layouts, which are tend to be, at least in the US, so whoever's building office, which is not that many people right now, but the layouts tend to be open as the way people have worked has changed. You get less benefits from building modular than when you're building hundreds of repeatable units with bathrooms and kitchens. So that's kind of just gives you a little insight in terms of the title. The excitement that we're feeling at this conference about the development of different industries in the Caribbean is obviously something that has been of interest to Full Stack. And over the past year, through the relationships that we've created with some of the people here, particularly the organizers of the conference, we've decided that the best way to approach this growing and dynamic market is to work together with PlayOn. And so we're really working together with them on trying to see what the best opportunities and approaches are into the market, whether it's in Barbados or Guyana or Trinidad, Jamaica, and wherever it is that we're going to be working. What Full Stack brings to the table is the full construction of buildings in a factory. And you know, as you see here in the slide, that starts with pre-construction and planning. It's always good, particularly in real estate development, to measure twice. We like to say to measure 3 times and to cut once. So from pre-construction and design and material procurement, once you know exactly what you're going to be building, and the actual offsite fabrication, those are all the functions that Full Stack in this venture will focus on. But then when you get to the actual installation of the building on site, that is where it is critical to have good local partnerships, because Full Stack does not act as a general contractor. We're creating the building in a factory in a most efficient way, but then you need a local general contractor with local knowledge and expertise and the ability to recruit the right people to do the installation and to manage the process. And of course, as I'll discuss, you also need a local contractor and others to work on site selection and building the foundation, et cetera. So that to us is a basis of a good joint venture where each element within the venture knows what their roles are and focuses on execution. So just a little bit more about Full Stack itself. We consider ourselves the leading innovator in the design and manufacture, particularly of mid to high-rise modular buildings. Previous to this, and the reason why I got recruited to Full Stack is because I had started a company called Tech Prefab, which focused primarily on single-family homes. And I know the congressman is not here, so I can say that we built a lot of the homes in China. But from viewing the market in the United States, which is where we were focused on, because we were building in China and selling into the Bay Area of California, a place where there is particularly high costs for construction and particularly labor shortages to do it. This is actually true throughout the United States and in many other regions in the world, including the Caribbean, but in the Bay Area, where costs are so high, it was even more acute, and so that was our business plan. We were building in China and shipping the materials flat-packed in containers to ports on the West Coast of the United States, and then doing the installations there. And one of the things that kind of led to focusing more on mid to high rise is the fact that these acute housing shortages demand that people need to start thinking about living not only in single family homes, but in more dense living situations. And that kind of led me personally to focusing more on doing mass housing because of millions of units of housing that's required just in the US alone. We have not just a factory that does the same kind of construction that's done on site, and we do it inside a building, but there's all kinds of technologies, including the technology that we developed at Tech Prefab, which we brought over to Full Stack, that Full Stack uses in order to enhance the design and the work that's done. And this is there's a lot of stuff here, and I just point out one that to me was particularly interesting. We have a very high level of what we call dimensional accuracy. That's on the bottom left-hand corner. So we use these proprietary meteorology systems inside the factory during the time of construction, and that allows us to have a much lower tolerance to actually design and fabricate the framing systems that are used. And all of this eliminates a lot of construction issues that can delay projects and make them more costly. So that's sort of one example of the many different areas where we focus on to make things more efficient that distinguishes us from the conventional development that is done today on site. But here I highlight some of the elements that are plaguing conventional construction. I mentioned affordability and housing shortages. There's a relation, there's a shortage of housing in the United States, and there's also a shortage of affordable housing. The numbers are in millions. When we think about the rest of the world, it's not just the US that suffers from that. So that's kind of one thing that is demanding a change in the way construction happens. There's also the costs that have been exacerbated by COVID through supply chain issues have put an even finer microscope on how people are gonna. Oh, okay. Yeah, have put a finer microscope on cost savings, and The other elements that have been which discussed at this conference are the sustainability issues, and one of the biggest polluters in the world is construction. If anyone has ever passed a construction site, particularly of a mid to high-rise building, you see that there are all kinds of debris around, and there's so many other elements of pollution that take place when looking at a building, so that if one is to try to comply to the green standards, particularly the LEED standards, you can see that how construction and building development is such a major cause of this. The other is very interesting, that the way buildings were built until now don't take into consideration all of the wellness issues that have become very important in the way buildings are being built, whether it's office building or residential or hospitality. There's even a new standard that has been created. So in addition to the LEED standard for green and sustainability, there's a wellness standard that is now, I think there's actually a second one that has come into the picture. Because people who, especially now, through COVID, we've been spending so much more time indoors. The ideas of having healthy living environments and healthy work environments when it comes to things like air and water, et cetera, have also become a big issue. So what I want to talk about now is there is a, actually I want to go back one slide. There is a slide that almost every modular or prefabricated company shows when they're, and here it is, shows when they're trying to demonstrate some of the advantages of building in a factory. So when you're building inside a factory, you can take advantage of the fact that you're not exposed to weather conditions. Because, for example, building in the Northeast of the United States, we have long, cold winters, and that can cause significant delays. That's one advantage. The advantage that's highlighted here in this, what I call the famous modular prefab slide, is just the serial nature of conventional structure on site. When you're building on site, you can only do one thing at a time. First, you have to prepare the foundation, and only then can you start building the building itself. That key difference between conventional and modular can save many, many months off a project. And as we all know, time is money. If you can save many, many months off a project, there are costs, whether they accrue based on financing, or if you're building something for rent or sale and you can finish 6 months earlier, that means you can start renting it or selling it 6 months earlier. And at a time when there are a lot of challenges in raising the capital, the equity and debt that's needed to do construction projects, where you can be more efficient in time and schedule, has a very big effect on the overall viability of projects. What you see here, just to dig in a little bit more, is that in what we call the traditional process, design, bid, build, where you hire an architect to design a project. Then once you have the you have the design that is now used for bidding with different contractors and subcontractors. Only then do you have something that you can then go and, depending on the jurisdiction and the municipality, or get approval. But all of that happens in kind of the same kind of serial manner, in which there isn't as much communication and collaboration between the different parties, because there's so many contractors and subcontractors. Increasingly in the US, some of the big problems are subcontractors showing up, subcontractors being able to staff. In very often, one subcontractor who delays an element of construction can keep the entire project and have it further delayed. So you have that, and because of the lack of coordination in the traditional construction process, you have probably one of the biggest contributors to projects going over schedule and over budget, and that's change orders. There are contractors, or the joke is that there are contractors whose whose business plan is change orders, right? That's how they make a bulk of their profit. So in contrast to that, the process that we use, which we call design, manufacture, construct, there is a lot more work that needs to be done upfront in modular construction, but once it's done, everything is digitally perfected in the sense that we know exactly what materials are going to be used. It's a process that is much more akin to building a car in a factory than to building a house on site. And so you have much more visibility and transparency on what your costs are going to be. We can pretty much, the labor costs are internal because most of the work is done in the factory. We try to shift as much labor as possible to the factory work, which is, in terms of the employee's perspective, is much safer, is much better. They're not working, even on the 15th floor of a building, the employees working on ground level because they're modules, and they get worked on one by one. It's seen much more as a job where they don't have to weather the elements because they're working indoors. So from that perspective, in a time where it's so difficult to recruit employees, that becomes another benefit. But really the key benefit, of which there are many, is the collaboration around the planning and the design of the project so that you have certainty of execution on time. The other hat that I wear, as some of you know, is financing development and acquisitions of real estate projects across the United States. And unfortunately, almost every single development project I've ever worked on in terms of bringing the capital to the project has gone over time and over budget. So you can see how I developed this interest only 3 or 4 years ago, but developed this interest in prefab construction. I want to further talk about some of the additional advantages that we have. And again, it is a growing industry within the United States, although it's far behind Asia and Europe in terms of the percentage of construction that is built in factory as opposed to on site. It's changing rapidly. There are a number of companies that are raising a lot of capital. We've raised a lot of capital. There are other companies coming into the fore, but we've been doing it for a while, and it's really more on the business side and the finance side and the project acquisition side. But my partners are deeply experienced in building and construction, particularly in modular. And there's all kinds of developments that I'm going to get into within the way our system is designed that are proprietary and that give us a big advantage relative to someone who was doing conventional construction decide to open up a factory. This is a picture of the factory that we have. It's in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So you can understand the advantage of us being in New York on the East Coast at the Navy Yard, where we have 100,000 square feet, and it's in proximity to both shipping by truck and shipping by boat. We also have a factory in Portland, Oregon. We're working on some West Coast projects there. And one of the many reasons why I'm at this conference is we think that the next place for us to open up a factory would be in the Caribbean. Here I go into a little bit more detail about the system that we use. And if you can go back to the example that I gave of building a car, if you go on certain car websites like Tesla, there's one chassis that they built for the car, and then you can pick all kinds of options around that chassis. So that's kind of conceptually how Fullstack has thought about modular construction. There's a proprietary system for chassis design, and there's flexibility within that. Because you need to be flexible, because not everyone is building the same cookie cutter building. As I mentioned here, some of the modules that we do have special circulation modules. There are kitchens, there are bathrooms. We're actually building now, we have a contract with Google And in New York City, Google has bought a lot of office real estate. We're actually building specific, this is a subcomponent, but we're just building unisex bathroom modules for Google as a client, which is very interesting. But going back to the auto example, the way automobile manufacturing has become so systematized is by breaking everything down to its components. Sometimes the components are built in the same factory as the main factory. Other times they're not. You have, if you've ever seen a picture of a production line in an auto manufacturing facility, you see how there's the main chassis that moves along, and then people are either installing components or building components around it. So this is the whole kind of philosophy of thinking here. I know that I presented this once and someone said, well, isn't a building or a home or a building much more complicated than a car? And I have to put this slide together, but it's actually, a building has less systems than a car. If you look at today's modern car and look at all the different systems that are inherent in the car, a building can actually be in some ways simpler. So here, we show also that you're not constrained by the fact that your building is being modular in terms of both the outer design of the building and the interior design. Now, some of you may know about container shipping buildings that are made out of containers that are not being used anymore. And there are lots of containers that they have these aerial photos you can see of containers. It looks like a cemetery of containers. And so there's an industry where some people are doing that. And it's, in some ways, it's a brilliant idea. It's environmental, but what we're doing has nothing to do with that. The dimensions may look like containers because ultimately they have to be built efficiently in terms of transport, but we're not making anything out of containers, and we're not shipping anything containers. They ship on their own without the need for containers. You can see here, as I was talking about, the whole idea here is to have sub-assemblies and to have components built, and the components can be they could be specially installed in buildings of various designs, but things that are repeatable should be made in an easy way. I mean, think about just the concept of plug and play. So what we have, again, that's proprietary, is we've developed a set of cladding and facade assemblies which could be put on different types of building chassis. There's a lot more detail around it, but you get the idea. And here, going back to sort of the outer framework of the building, if you're doing a massing study and you're trying to figure out what the best size and shape is, you should know that with modular, you're not constrained at all. There's a lot of creativity. I know that we have a design for a round building, so you're not necessarily constrained by the fact that the main chassis is a rectangle. There's different elements, there's different ways to shape it, and there's a lot of customization within the idea that if you do mass customization, you can gain the efficiencies but still retain creativity around buildings so that not everything looks the same. On the other hand, if you're building, as I said at the outset, hospitality and multifamily, you do want to retain a certain cookie cutter element and have, as much repeatable components as possible. But there's ways to do it so that the building doesn't look cookie cutter. And that's something that I want to emphasize because people sometimes assume differently about modular construction. When we talk about these issues of affordability, of health, of sustainability, they're all sometimes not connected to the details. And as we know, we have some men of the cloth here, God is in the details. And in real estate development, there are a lot of details. And not to go through every one of these, but within the general system that we do to build modular construction, there is almost no waste. Now, I know waste is a good thing because you can take the waste and make money out of it, but what we do is try to be a little more preventative and try to prevent waste to begin with, at least in our system. So we will not be a source for Sweden, I think it was Sweden, of importing waste. We will try to do that as little as possible. There are other things within the construction that make it healthier. We sort of have this first slide, which I call today, and then we have some of the elements that will also add to these three factors: health and affordability, sustainability, that are in the pipeline that we're developing. So I want to show you a couple of examples of things that we've done and things that we're working on that can sort of give people an idea of what could be done in the Caribbean that might inspire you to think about projects that have potential. So this is the first building that my partners built that got some attention because at the time that they built it in Brooklyn, New York, this was the tallest modular building in the world. It's right next to the Barclays Center, if any of you know Brooklyn, which is a big sports arena. New York Nets play there. And it's a 32-story building. You could see that there's some variation in the facade type and the color. The interiors are beautiful. I've walked it. It's lived in now. It's no longer the tallest building in the world. It's now the tallest modular building in North America because I think someone in Singapore built a bigger building. You know, things like that happen. The idea is not to be the tallest, but it's to be the most efficiently built and you know, to be the most viable project. But this one happens to be a proof that we can build in this world modularly and we can build tall. And the fact is that from an engineering, a structural engineering perspective, using our system, we can go as high as 65 floors. So hopefully we'll be seeing that one day in a market and location where it's warranted. The next slide is a building. It's a hotel. It's the Treehouse brand, which is owned by Starwood Capital, who's our client in this. This is in the planning phase right now. This is to be built right in the heart of Silicon Valley in Sunnyvale. So this project, it's a 143 guest room hotel. We're building it out of Portland, naturally, from the West Coast facility. And as you could see when you look at it, and as is true with any well-built modular construction, if you didn't know that it was modular, you wouldn't know, both from the interior and the exterior. There's a lot of flexibility, both in design, as I mentioned earlier, but in the cladding and the outer. If you want to make a building that looks like it's made out of wood or has wooden cladding, all of these things can be done. And so the Treehouse brand, as you can gather from the name, is one that's environmental, sustainable, back to nature, has a green element to it. And so, you know, that this is the design. We're in a third stage now of design for them. We've just actually this morning I was talking to our CEO, and we got approvals from Starwood on kind of the basic procurement plan. So we're very excited about this one. We think it's going to bring modular a lot more attention in the United States, which is part of us and even our competitors in the industry. We're trying to really make sure that people understand the benefits of it. This is another project which is really interesting. I've got a chance to tell one or two of you about it. This is another hotel that we're building out of the New York factory, but this is going to be shipped to Saudi Arabia, to a city called Al Ula, which is a UNESCO heritage site. And I know you have one here because I passed it by between the airport and the Hilton. But this is another hotel that when you look at it, it's not obvious that it's modular. This is a preliminary design, so it's a little earlier in the planning and the construction versus the one I showed previously in California. But you get the sense that that you don't need to be in country X to build a project for Country Y. But the group that is building this, they're very smart developers. This is not a unlimited pot of gold that someone is throwing at. This is people that have surveyed the possibilities of building this on site and decided that it makes a lot more sense to use our system. So we're pretty excited about this project. This is another project that's in the planning stage. You can see that, again, there's a lot of variation in all of these projects when you look at them. Within the project itself, there's variety, and again, anyone can work with us on trying to figure out and procure the best materials for each project. What makes the project good for modular is not it's not the outer look. It's not what you're trying to achieve aesthetically, because we can do anything. It's more what you're trying to achieve in terms of viability. And that's where we can be most helpful. But in terms of the creativity of the building, you have just as much flexibility as you would when building on site. This is another project that we actually won from the city of New York. This is actually an affordable housing project. Affordability in New York City may have a different definition than affordability elsewhere, but it is a very dramatic issue and has been for quite some time. And it takes up a lot of time of the city council and the mayor. New York has a very drastic shortage of housing. Specifically, and it's not good when you have a housing shortage in an important urban center like New York. And you can see this in other large cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, where unfortunately, due to lack of affordability, you have the sprouting up of shanty towns and tent cities. And so New York, like other locations, can't build fast enough. And so they've taken a strategic initiative to try to actually help build industry in New York and create jobs in New York by building with us this affordable project. And then just to sort of wrap up, and this is a little bit more about FullStack. These are pictures of other projects. My partners actually did the Barclay Center itself. It was not built modularly, but this is just other development experience. And it's important to know because, you know, in my previous company, we built very small homes and we built them very well. And to build large towers, you know, these mid to high rise construction projects requires people who can't learn on the job. It is very hard to learn on the job. One of the great things about the team that we've assembled, I don't have the management page here, but you can see almost all of my colleagues who are specifically on the construction side have decades of experience in the industry, both on the on-site and on the modular construction side, other projects that we worked on. So just in closing, what I would say is that we are very interested, as mentioned before, in not just building projects here on behalf of groups in the Caribbean, but the idea of building a factory here means that you can build at home, so to speak. You can train a whole new element of a workforce. I know it was mentioned earlier that you know, young people today may not necessarily look at going into things like mining or construction as their first choice. You know, they may instead want to be influencers or whatever it is that kids today want to go into. But just as, metals and so forth, without it, the things that we have couldn't be here. We all live in buildings, some of us work in buildings. The construction industry, particularly the modular industry, has become a high-tech industry that is full of innovation daily. I've only given you really the tip of the iceberg of the innovation that we actually use in the construction, the systems that we have. We get sent all kinds of new ideas and new companies that are propping up in what they call the prop tech world, property technology. And it's a bit mind-boggling. Some of it's relevant to us, some of it's not. But the last thing that I got was a company actually out of Israel that has AI attached to the construction worker's helmet that films things and can automatically identify where all materials are on the site and put them in a bill of materials, a bill of lading, whatever the action is being taken with those materials. I mean, it's pretty fascinating. So I hope that when we come here next year and we have the same conference, which I know is going to probably be even bigger. I wouldn't be surprised if it's double or triple. Hopefully we can start to talk and get some slides up about full stack Plion development projects that are being done here. Thank you.
And we are moving a little behind time, so I will just move right into the next speaker. And he will be joining us virtually, so he should be on Zoom already. Do we have him there, Pablo? Is he there? Sure? Okay, all right. So I'll read his bio. Pablo Bolanos, CEO of Space Architect, has over 20 years of experience. Pablo Bolanos, and as I said, he's CEO of Space Architect. With over 20 years of experience, Pablo has been a point reference in restaurant specialty project design in New York City. His project includes the Ecuadorian Consulate in New York City and many more major restaurants, and many, I'm fumbling here. Okay. His projects include the Ecuadorian Consulate in New York City and many major restaurants in the metro area. Pablo has succeeded where most have failed. With deep knowledge of construction costs and permitting systems, he brings an incredible array of project management skills. Experience through design is the main focus of Pablo's work. Whether he's designing a hotel or food mall, every detail focuses on how the consumer perceives the space around them. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll be joined now by Pablo Bolanos, CEO of Space Architect, joining us from New York City. Please fix your eyes.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon to everybody there. Unfortunately, I'm not there, but visually I'm here. And I just want to tell you a little bit about why I'm here and how I got to this point. About 5 years ago, I met Rafael De Angelis through a mutual friend. And since we shared the same vision with Rafael and the same ideas and principles, we start working together. And it's been a good 5 years. We are working now in the last project that we have that I'm going to share with you, our vision for Guyana. Obviously, it has to do with an emerging economy. And we know that Guyana, in about a few years from now, is going to be one of the leading economies in South America and the Caribbean. And so we took this project, and I'm going to talk about Guyana and specifically of Georgetown. So I'm going to share on the screen with you. I have a video presentation and a PDF that I'm going to go over, if I am allowed to do that. Let me see. Can everybody, it's okay, right? Everybody can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let me put the phone. So I'm going to talk about Georgetown. So there are three parts to this presentation. The first one is obviously urban planning. As an emerging economy, Georgetown needs to get guidance in what we are going to see in the next 10, 15, 20 years from now. Part of the problem is obviously the infrastructure that Georgetown and Guyana has at the present time, and how we are going to overcome that, to make it the next Guyana in the 20 years, right? I'm talking about a little bit about history, demographics. We know some of the demographics or history of Guyana. We know that Guyana found oil, and probably based on that, the rest of the industries are going to come up and be a boom in the next few years. Georgetown in general needs a lot of infrastructure, whether they are roads or bridges. And my focus will be to talk about urban planning. So the first part is urban planning. What are we going to do with the city? So the interaction between public, private, and everything as a landmarks can make sense in this project. There are existing canals that we have to connect. There are government buildings that we have to connect somehow. Public services, private services, landmarks, whether they are gardens, museums, etc. They all have to be connected in a way that it makes sense and that people can enjoy those spaces. We propose the creation of green corridors connecting all these landmarks. We are proposing, similar to what we see in Champs-Élysées, for example, pedestrian corridors where we have all these walks that people can take advantage of, similar to Paseo de Gracia. And all these things, we are looking into how we are going to do this. There are some few ideas. We develop these things, and I'm going to show you a video where you can actually see what all these things are going to look like. The second part of my presentation is about road development. There are few cities in Guyana that needs to be connected because of many reasons. One is because they are important cities. The second reason could be that in the case of Cucuani, is all the way in the south, is in the inner part of the country. And that city needs to be connected because all the goods that come from the interior of the country come into this city. And from here, they have to come all the way to the ports. So that's also a very important road that needs to be developed. The first part, I'm going to talk now. There are a few cities that I'm going to talk quickly about how they connect. Is Georgetown to Parica. Is a very important connection because there is a lot of ports in the future that are going to be located by Parica city. And so this is very important road right now that I think the government is looking into do that. The existing conditions and existing bridge are going to be replaced with a new one. And this will be the new bridge. It's the new Demarara Bridge. Then you have the seawall. The seawall, the boardwalk is in existing conditions. You have it's about 1.5 miles in length. And we divide it in two phases, basically. We have the phase one, which is the hotel and the marina. And the second phase is the commercial part of it. On the right, these are the existing photos of the place of the boardwalk. A lot of landmarks along the boardwalk. This will be the first phase. We are basically connecting and doing, and we are doing a marina, we are doing a hotel and a convention center on this area. It's about 0.5 miles of length. Then you have the Amazonic Hotel. Some photos of what it's going to look like. And then you have the marina and the convention center. Along the boardwalk, we are going to have all the restaurants and shops that people can actually enjoy while they are walking through. There are some views of the space. And then we have the second part of the of this boardwalk, which is from the pool all the way up. All these are empty lots right now that are going to be developed. And so we are proposing that the second phase will be from this point on. It's about a mile in length, and it needs to be developed as a boardwalk. It is important now because local people meet there. And I think once this is developed, we think that it's going to be the gate of Guyana or Georgetown. I think that's the importance of this area. Some ideas of what is going to go there, for example, food. I think is important for people who arrive to Guyana to understand the culture by either food, we have sports, what kind of sports is practiced there, and all the culture that comes with it, right? This is the residential building, one of the residential buildings that we are proposing on this area. And I think that's basically a quick view of what we are proposing for this part of, for my part on this project. I'm gonna share with you a video that is actually going to give you a better understanding what I just talked about. I don't know if Rafael at the end of the video wants to add things to my presentation, but let me stop this presentation and share the video. Okay, so I hope I translate everything that we are planning or are thinking in our vision is for Georgetown and Guyana. It is very difficult to translate if I'm not there, but I hope that you guys understand. And I don't know if Rafael can take some. I don't know if there is questions that we can take or if everything was clear.